Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to peel back the layers on a story you probably think you know. The rise and, well, the fall of San Aurelio. It's a story about a community that was born from this incredible idealism and then got completely consumed by a legend it just couldn't outrun.
It all starts with a myth, right? One that you'd hear whispered on the local news. Something that got treasure hunters all excited. This idea of a lost stash of gold deep in the Florida swamp. A violent federal raid. A mystery that's still kicking around 2 decades later. But here's the question we're asking today. What if that legend? What if the story itself was the weapon they used to destroy the whole place?
See, the official story, the one you'll read in the reports, paints this picture of a really dangerous anti-government cult. But then you talk to the people who were actually there, and they're asking totally different questions. Was it a cult, or was it just a community trying something new? Was it a weapon stockpile, or was it just people trying to defend themselves? Okay, let's really dive in and see what we can find. To get to the truth, you've got to start with the people. And, San Aurelio wasn't born from some single unified ideology. Not at all. It came from a handful of very different, very disillusioned people who all came together to try and build something new out of the rubble of their old lives.
It all really kicked off with Sarah Whitfield, and you got to understand, she wasn't some kind of radical agitator. She was a former consultant who became a farmer. I mean, all she wanted was to grow her own food and be left alone. The system, though, well, it had very different plans for her.
That's a quote from Sarah, right on camera, just after state inspectors had bulldozed her greenhouses. Why? Because of raw milk sales and some zoning violations. This wasn't just a fine, you see. They completely destroyed her livelihood, and that was the exact moment she started looking for a way out of the whole system. She was, in every sense, the seed of San Aurelio.
So next you have Ethan. He was an Army vet who saw exactly how power works when he was overseas. And when he came home, he just felt like he didn't fit in anymore. He was just kind of drifting between security jobs, really looking for a sense of purpose that he lost somewhere along the way. And this quote from him, wow, it is absolutely crucial. Ethan wasn't some true believer from the get-go. He was a pragmatist, a soldier. But he saw something in Sarah's vision that was actually worth defending. He didn't just bring the skills to protect them. He brought this desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, it could actually work.
All right, so every community like this needs a tech wizard, right? For them, that was Marcus Lee. He was this brilliant programmer who basically ran away from Silicon Valley. Why? He got pushed out for questioning all the groupthink around privacy and all that. He saw the digital world becoming a massive tool for control.
And that quote right there, that just gets to the absolute heart of his philosophy. For Marcus, San Aurelio's was a chance to build real-world systems, totally decentralized. Things like communication, currency, that couldn't just be shut down by some corporate board or a government agency whenever they felt like it. Now, every community needs a moral compass, its soul. And in San Aurelio, that really came from 2 guys. Gabo Martinez, an exile who had seen the hypocrisy of communism up close in Cuba, and Daniel Herrera, a builder who'd been completely scarred by corruption in his town and his own church's failure to do anything about it. For them, this was not just some political project. No way. It was deeply spiritual. They were blending all these ideas, faith, a bit of Austrian economics, this concept of voluntary cooperation, into their own unique philosophy. They truly believed that building a free community was in itself an act of worship.
And then there was Jack Doyle, the mysterious handyman. You could call him the tinfoil hat of the group. He was the guy who was always talking about conspiracies, the collapse of civilization, secret plots by the global elites, the whole shebang.
Honestly, most people just thought he was nuts. But here's the thing about Jack. His conviction, his surprisingly broad range of skills, and this uncanny knack for predicting what the authorities were going to do next, it made him unpredictable, for sure, but also totally essential. He was like the community's early warning system.
So, you've got this unlikely crew, right? Idealists, builders, outcasts, all assembled. But how did they actually go from an idea to turning a literal ghost town into a home? Well, they didn't just squat. They used a very old and, frankly, very clever legal strategy. It all came down to this legal idea called adverse possession. And what's so interesting here is what it tells us about their intent. This wasn't some outlaw takeover. They were trying to reclaim forgotten land completely within the bounds of the law. The plan was actually pretty simple, and this is the key part. It was legal. The idea was to find these abandoned pieces of land in the ghost town of San Aurelio, pay off all the overdue taxes to the county, fix the places up, and then, after a few years, file a formal legal claim to make it theirs. They were trying to build something, not break something.
But you know how these things go. As soon as they started to build, they started attracting the wrong kind of attention. The local authorities, well, they saw a community growing without their say-so. And the first lines of conflict weren't drawn with guns, they were drawn with clipboards.
And man, things went south fast. It started with just bureaucratic harassment, what Sarah perfectly called death by paperwork. Then it got worse. A county clerk actually tried to get a bribe out of them. Gabo, having literally fled that exact kind of corruption in Cuba, just flatly refused. And that refusal, it led directly to the first armed standoff.
And this is the moment everything changed. When the inspectors came back, Ethan, the veteran, just calmly chambered around in his rifle. He didn't point it at anybody. It wasn't an act of aggression. It was a clear, nonverbal statement that this conversation was over. The inspectors left, but that one single, deliberate sound, that started a very dangerous rumor.
And this right here is where the story completely turns on its head. This is the point where a community's practical, logical actions get twisted into a myth that would become the perfect justification to destroy them.
You have to see how this myth was built, piece by piece. Every single step they took towards self-reliance was reframed into something sinister. So, they used silver coins for trade. The outside world heard they were hiding untraceable gold. Marcus built a private, encrypted communication network. They were accused of aiding criminal networks. They armed themselves to defend their own property. They were labeled a dangerous paramilitary threat.
And it all just snowballed from there. That simple refusal to pay a bribe, amplified by Jack's wild rants about gold and conspiracies, and mixed with the echo of Ethan chambering that round, it all morphed into the legend of the San Aurelio Vault. A massive, hidden treasure that never, ever existed became the perfect excuse for the world to stop seeing them as homesteaders and start seeing them as a threat that had to be neutralized.
And that leaves us with this really provocative question, one that goes way beyond the ruins of one little town in Florida. When a myth, a story, a narrative becomes more powerful than the actual truth, who gets to write history? Does the real reason why these people came together in the first place even matter anymore?